Hello, in this video, I'm going to run through all of the cards that I would include if I was going to build an Eddie Brock Venom Lethal Protector deck. Here are the in-universes version, and I specifically am going to focus on the cards that are good with Venom, since I think that's a lot stronger than Eddie Brock. First up is Ghalta. We need to be able to sacrifice big creatures whenever Venom attacks, and we need to be able to put big creatures into play cheaply, and Ghalta can check for the other power of creatures you already have, and can essentially come into play for just green while sacrificing for 12 cards and then put basically any card from our hand onto the battlefield. Next, I have Anti-Causal Vestige. You can warp it in for 4, sacrifice it to Venom. Venom sees the 6, which draws you 6 cards. You get the leaves the battlefield ability of Anti-Causal Vestige of putting a card from your hand into play tapped, and then Venom also puts a card from your hand into play. So there's a lot of value to be had there. Now I want to go through some creatures that I think are good because they have good death triggers. So not only are they decently big, this is a 5-drop, so you could put this in with Venom, or you can also sacrifice the Venom to draw 5 cards. Not a bad deal at all. And they have good dies triggers. So first up is Junji the Midnight Sky. When it dies, you either can have each opponent discard 2 cards, lose 2 life, or put a non-dragon creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So that's anything you've already sacrificed, or anything that your opponents have, had die or destroyed or put into their graveyard with their own entomb effects. Junji can get it back into play for you. Next, I have Primeval Protector. The spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature your opponents control, so this can come into play for just 1 green, but be sacrificed to Venom for 11. And when it enters, it gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control. So this thing can be big. And then later in the video, I'm going to go to some cards that can buff these big creatures and also take advantage of them. That would be great with Primeval Protector. Next, I have Atsushi the Blazing Sky with a good death trigger. When it dies, you can either exile the top 2 cards of your library, and until end of turn you may play those cards, or make 3 treasure tokens that come into play untapped. So you can follow up with any of your 3-drop enchantments or removal spells. Lots of good value there. Again, I think these kind of creatures are good to sacrifice, but also good to put into play and then later have sacrifice. If you want to go all-out combo, you can build a Protean Hulk build. Not the most fun, because you can just sacrifice this and instantly win, just getting a 2-card combo that has total amount of value 6 or less. Kind of boring, but if you wanted to build it, you could. Ju Ifit, Osteoharmonist. For 3 mana, 2/3 tap, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is a way to get those big things that you sacrifice back into play. It doesn't matter if they lose all abilities, because if you just return Ghalta to play and then sacrifice Ghalta to Venom, it's going to see another 12 cards. So this is a great way to get cards back into play. Corval the Fey Cursed Coon. This is just a good thing to attack with. Sacrifice, put into play after you sacrifice your Ghalta effects. Plus, it checks whenever you sacrifice a permanent, you can put a +1/+1 counter on this and draw a card. Not only does Venom have things sacrificing, we're making treasures, we're sacrificing all kinds of things in Commander. Corval is going to be great. Ghalta Stampede Tyrant is 8 mana value, so you can play this and sacrifice it, or put this into play after you sacrifice your Primeval Titan or your Ghalta effects. And whenever it enters the battlefield, you put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So if you just dump your whole hand into play, another card that's great to dump your whole hand into play is Kodama of the East Street. Whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, you may put a permanent card with equal or lesser converting mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield. So this is a fantastic thing to put into play, but it also likes it when you put your other things into play. Since that permanent, when Venom puts it into play without this ability, you could put another thing into play and just ramp, because at a minimum, you can just put a land into play. It also says whenever a land comes into play, you can put a different land into play, which is great. But Vaultborn Tyrant, whenever it or another creature with power 4 or greater enters under your control, you gain 3 and draw a card. And whenever it dies, if it's not a token, create a token that's a copy of it. The token would also have the same mana value, so you can have a 7 mana creature, sacrifice Vaultborn Tyrant, put a token that is also a Vaultborn Tyrant with 7. So at the next turn, you can sacrifice that 7 and throw something else into play. Super good. It's basically 2 big things in one. Kokusko, the Evening Star. Whenever it dies, each opponent loses 5 life. You gain life equal to life lost this way. A great dies ability. 6 is enough. 6 mana is enough to put it into play after sacrificing a big thing, but also is big enough where you can sacrifice and put something else into play. Because you have to sacrifice a creature, but you don't necessarily have to put another creature into play. You can put any permanent into play. Rakdos the Muscle. Whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile cards equal to the mana value from the top of your library. Until your next turn, you may play those cards and mana of any type can be spent to cast those cards. I did just mess up. It says the top of target player's library, so it doesn't have to be you. You can exile cards at the top of your opponent's library and then play those cards. You can also sacrifice creatures to it to give it indestructible. So this is just takes advantage of the fact our deck is already sacrificing. Rectus Muscle would be great here. The Tora, the Incinerator. 3 black, red, and a green for a 6/6 flyer. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do it, you'll damage equal to that creature's power to any target, and you create 3 treasures. So if you're already building a sacrifice deck, you can put this into play. Sacrifice it like I keep saying. But this is another way to sacrifice your big creatures. Deal damage equal to those creatures' power and targets. So you can get a problematic commander, or just start hitting your commanders for a lot of damage. It's great there. A Tally Primal Conqueror. 7 mana, 7/7 trample. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent exiles cards on top of the library to exile a non-land card, and you can cast those spells for free. So you can later sacrifice those. But 7 mana is great to put into play with Venom. And then later in the game, you can pay 9 and then a Phyrexian green to transform it into a Tally Primal Sickness. Trample indestructible 11/11, and when it deals combat damage to a player, they get that many poison counters. So if you can find an open lane to transform it and knock out one of your opponents, that would be great, because 11 is enough to kill the player. Lycosa's Crawler, we're going to draw a lot of cards, sacrificing Goltzes, sacrificing 8/8, sacrificing 7/7s, and having our opponents lose that much life is great. You can't put this into play after, you can't put this into play. So you sacrifice, you can't put this into play because we won't see those card draws. So you really want to play this and not have this card be the one you put into play, because Venom won't be able to reward you on that card draw. Since the card draw happens, then you put a creature into play. So, Terror of the Peaks. Whenever another creature enters under your control, it deals damage equal to that creature's power on any target. This is a great thing to put into play after you sacrifice a 7-drop. You can just play this, but it also sees all of your future things come into play and just be horrific. Anger. Something you could put into play because it's 4. You could sacrifice and you have anger, and then whenever anger inevitably dies, to even to any of our sacrifice effects, and make sure that all of the big things we have come into play have haste from now on. So if you play any extra turn spells, or extra combat steps, there's creatures would have haste. The big 7/7 use punch player would have haste. Not dead after all. 1 black instant until on a turn, target creature you control gains. When this creature dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its own control with a Wicked Roll token on it. Really, I just have this thing in it for all of those cards. Let's say whenever this creature dies, return to the battlefield tapped. So you can sacrifice a creature to Venom and then have it not be dead after all, which is great. Saw in Half is a way to take advantage of us, enter the battlefield, or leave the battlefield abilities again. By whenever that creature that you destroy dies, its controller creates 2 token copies of that creature, except their base power and toughness are equal to half the base power and toughness. You round up each time, but you can essentially take advantage of those big enters or leaves the battlefield. Plus, those tokens that are copies of the creature have the large mana value that you can sacrifice to Venom later. Rivetier's Ascendancy, black, red, and a green. Whenever you sack a creature, you may return a target creature card with lesser mana value from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So every single time you sacrifice something to Venom, you can just stick another thing from your graveyard into play. So you can return something you already sacrificed back into play, which is great. Sneak Attack is a way to get all these big things into play. You're not always going to have 9, 7, 8, 12, 10 mana. And so just paying 1 red to stick it into play, attack with Venom, sacrifice the creature. You get advantage of the large mana value and then put something into play permanently, which is great. Next, I have Entomb. If you play a Recursion strategy, you're going to be sacrificing a lot of creatures. You need to get them back into play. Sometimes you just want to entomb one into the graveyard right away, which is great. Rust Rebirth, choose target creature. Choose the creature you're going to sacrifice. When that creature dies this turn, switch your library for a creature card with lesser mana value, put on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So now you can solve any problem you might run into. You sacrifice your Gauntlet and you can go get any card from your deck and put into play, and then put a card from your hand to play. Solve whatever issue you need to. You need to destroy an artifact or enchantment, go grab a big creature that does that. You need to destroy a creature, go grab a thing that does that. You need to exile a graveyard, go grab a creature that does that. So this is great. Rise of the Witch King. Each player sacrifices a creature. If you sack the creature this way, you return another permanent card from graveyard to the battlefield. So you can sacrifice just a 1/1. You get all the rewards that your deck has of sacrificing creatures, and then you put a big thing into play, and then get all the reward that your deck has of putting big things into play, like War, Storm, Surge. 6 mana for an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So now, the creatures you're putting into play with Venom are dealing massive amount of damage to your opponents and ending the game, or just dealing with problematic permanents. Virtue of Persistence is a removal spell. Tax to an enchantment that returns creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield. All those things we sacrificed with Venom, we're going to want them back into play. Greater Good is a way to sacrifice creatures and draw cards if we don't have Venom in play. You use to discard 3 cards, but it doesn't really matter. We fill out graveyard, you can reanimate them later. Rhythm of the Wild, giving those creatures +1/+1 or haste is great. You're playing big things, and you need to have them have trample or haste. So Gorg's Uprising can reward you for putting those big things into play. Because they have power 4 greater, you get to draw a card, and then give them trample or haste. The Reaver Cleaver is 3 mana for an artifact equipment. Also can give creatures trample, but whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, create that many treasure tokens. You're attacking with 12/12 and getting all of those treasures. You sacrifice 12/12 present into play. You can use those treasures to put the next big thing into play, which is great. Mimic Vat is 3 colors for an artifact. Whenever a non-token creature dies, you may exile that card. If you do, return each other exile cards with it onto the battlefield. So you exile a card under it, 3 tap, create a token that's a copy of it, and you have to exile the next end step. But basically, you have a Galta, you sack it to Venom, it goes under Mimic Vat. Next turn, you pay 3, create a token that's a copy of Galta. It has 12 mana value. Venom attacks, sees the 12, sacrifices it, because you're going to have to exile anyway, so you sacrifice a token. And then put everything into play. And the next turn, you pay 3, put another Galta into play, sacrifice it. And at 12 mana, you can just stick anything into play. Lightning Grease, our commander's going to need protection. It already has haste, but it's going to need protection. Also, giving protection to their other big things, or haste or other big things is great, but we need to protect Venom because it's going to be able to be dealt damage to really quickly. People are going to destroy it. And same with Foot Boots. The Skull Spore Nexus, 6 green. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power amount of creatures you control. Whenever one or more non-token creatures you control die, create a green fungus with base power and toughness equal to the total power of those creatures. You can also double target creature's power until end of turn. But it's not going to be that unusual for this card to be green. I mean, just with Venom in play, it's green 1, and it can continue to make big funguses whenever you sacrifice your things. Now, those don't have a mana value, so you can't sacrifice them to Venom, but they're still big things that you can give haste to, that you can give trample to, and they can deal a lot of damage. The Great Henge is also great in this deck because at a bare minimum, it's 4 mana, and it's usually going to cost less than that if you have Venom in play. It taps your green, you gain 2 life, and whenever a non-token creature enters under your control, so anytime, it doesn't have to be cast, anytime anything enters, you put a counter on it, and you draw a card. Just keep things moving. Birds of Paradise, Ignoble Hierarch, Delighted Halfling, and Lanorels. These are all creatures that can be our mana producers, but then also be returned with Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock has the 6 mana transform ability, which you can do to make it into Venom. So if on turn 1 you play a Birds of Paradise, an Ignoble Hierarch, a Delighted Halfling, or a Lanorels, and it dies, on turn 3 you can just play Eddie Brock and get it back, and you'd be much closer to being able to cast Venom in that point. Disciple of Freylis, this is a 6 mana creature on one side or a land on the other. When it enters, you sacrifice another creature, you gain X life and draw X cards. You're going to draw a ton of cards off of this, but it also just gives you something you can sacrifice or put into play, but it's just a land. So you're giving up 1 forest in your deck, and then it could just be a forest in the early game if you need it to be, which is great. Next, I have Susar Sakandi, Void Altar. A land planet enters tapped. It has black. It has station. So you can tap other creatures you control to put charge counters equal to its power on this planet. Station only as a sorcery. And then 12 plus, you can, once it has 12 or more things, so like you can just, if you put into play Galta, you can sacrifice, station it to Susar, the planet, sacrifice it to Venom, and you still get all the benefits. And then the Void Altar planet just becomes 1 black, tap, pay 2 life, sack a creature, draw cards equal to its power. So just another way to sacrifice big things. And that's really just what I keep wanting to point out. You just want to put big things into play, get benefits of those, have them die, get benefits of those. So there's just another way to do that. Keswick Wolf Run is a way to give your big Eldrazi creatures that you might play. Now, I did not include Eldrazi's in this list because whenever they die, they shuffle back your graveyard, which you might not want to do. But you could do that. I just think that it's going to be better if you take advantage of your graveyard. And giving them trample is great. Making them unblockable, making Venom unblockable, making your 12/12 creature unblockable, making your big, Blightsteel Colossus type creatures unblockable would be great. Reliquary Tower, you're going to be drawing a lot of cards. You do not want to discard them. So Reliquary Tower can protect the cards in your hand. And those are all of the cards that I would definitely include in a Venom Eddie Brock deck. I still think Eldrazi and Blightsteel Colossus and those kind of cards would be cool, but they shuffle themselves back, which I do not prefer. But I hope you enjoyed this deck. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and may your top decks be ever in your favor. Thank you.